Welcome back. In a couple of classes we are talking about the machine haptics, where we are looking at how to design the kinesthetic devices and tactile devices. Today we are going to slightly take a off route. We are going to talk about a relative topic which is related to the haptic design, but again coming from the perceptual point of view. We are going to talk about this topic is relevant to the virtual reality. So, this topic which we are recording today will be common for both the haptics as well as the virtual reality. The topic we are going to talk about is how perceptual principles can be applied when we are looking at an image, or when we are touching an object, or when we are hearing a sound. How are we perceiving things? Are there any principles? By understanding these principles, probably we can design better visual systems, better haptic systems, better auditory systems. That is the idea of listening to, looking at today's principles. So, principles of perceptions. They are known as Gestalt Principles. Gestalt is a term, is a German term referring to shape. Okay. So, we are when we are perceiving things, an image or a haptic object or sound, we are not looking at the components of visual picture or the what we are touching. Okay. We are looking at the shape of it. Essentially, we are talking about the form of it. The entirety is what we are looking at it. We are trying to again we saw in the earlier class what is the difference between the sensation and perception. Perception is adding meaning to it. We are relating to many things else, and essentially we are talking about the meaning of it, right. So, are there any principles related to this perception? How we make shapes, or how we form the entirety, how we perceive things, how we associate meaning? Is there any principle? That is what we are going to look at it. So, these principles are coming from maybe about 100 years old, essentially about after the First World War, the scientists have extended their psychology into the perception of visual images, and that is what has led to something called Gestalt's Principles of Perception. So, in today's class we will mostly look at the only visual perception, but the same principles can be extended to haptic perceptions as well, and also the auditory perception also. Okay. There are very few literatures as far as the haptic perception applying the Gestalt principles there. Similarly, auditory perception also. Most of the literature or reading material is only for the visual perception, but be aware that whatever we are going to read or look at today's principle can also be applied to haptic perception and the auditory perceptions. Okay. What are these principles? So, the Gestalt's principles of visual perception essentially we are going to look at. So, Gestalt's in the experimental psychology, it is which began prior to World War I, we perceive objects as well organized patterns rather than separate components. We group them together, we do not look at the components. Okay, that is the first principles. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We do not look at the parts, but we observe the wholeness, the full shape, the form. That is the principle based on the concept of the grouping. Grouping is only one concept, one principle. We are going to look at several other principles. Okay, there are essentially 6 principles of Gestalts: proximity, similarity, continuity, closure, area and symmetry. These are called the classical, we can say it as a classical Gestalt's principles. There are also recently more principles have been added. We will look at a couple of them as well. We will see each of this in detail with quite a few of examples. At the end of this lecture, I am going to give you a worksheet where you will be looking at certain pictures and then find out, write down what are the principles, Gestalt's principles used in this particular design. So, I would like to now focus on the principles. Now, try to remember the names of these principles so that you can write it in the worksheet. Okay. As I mentioned, Gestalts means form. Two of the most important principles, there are many principles, 6 principles. Among the 6 principles, these are the most important principles. We will see each of them. FigureGround. Once we see a image, we always separate the image into what is a figure, what is a background. Okay. So, when an object is surrounded by white space, keep a sense of proportion between the object and its surroundings. The objects form the foreground, the figure. The surroundings become the background or the ground. The figure is the focal image. We focus on the foreground, on the figure. We do not focus on the background, right. So, the ground is the background of the image, which we do not actually focus on it. In this example, if you look at it, the black is the background, the white circles are the foreground. We focus on the foreground, right. So, the figure ground relation, in that relation, and sometimes there will be some contours. Okay. The contours belong to the figure. For example, look at this example. What is a foreground, what is a background? Here the foreground is the, let us say, the white, and the blue one is the background. The contour belongs to the foreground, right. So, now
what is meant by contour? The differentiating,
maybe the edge is belong in here. The edge is obviously part of the figure, but in some pictures it may not be evident, and wherever the contours are there, it will be part of this figure. Okay. Now, once we have this, one of the unique property of this particular example is that you can switch between the foreground and the background. If you focus on the blue, then that becomes the foreground, the white becomes the background. Okay. So, when you focus on the background, a different image emerges. When you focus on the white foreground, a different image emerge, right. So, it depends upon what is your foreground, what is your background. Reversible figure and foreground background relationship. There are many examples are there where we can switch between the background and foreground, and therefore, it will lead to different images. In this example, if you focus on the black, you can see a light lamp. If you focus on the white as a foreground, then you can see the 2 faces, right. So, here also it is white as a lamp and black as the 2 faces, correct. You can actually switch or reverse this background and foreground. We are going to combine this principle of background and foreground and with another principle of smallness, which will give you much more meaning. Smaller areas tend to be seen as figures against a larger background. Smaller areas will be considered as the foreground. how much small, again it is relative, okay, with respect to the background. So, in this case, in the first image, if you look at it, the black shade is a smaller one, the white shade is a bigger one. So, the black shade is considered as the foreground. The Escher diagrams are one of the very good examples of this reversible figure or ground relationships. For example, here you can see, if you focus on the white, you can see the horse riding man. The same thing, if you focus on the black, you can see the reverse man riding the horse. Okay. This is again one of the very good examples of the Escher diagram. Foreground, if you take white as a foreground, you can see the fish. The black, if you take black as a foreground, you can see the flagfish. But one of the important things is that the background and the foreground are not seen simultaneously. We can see only one at a time. Can you see simultaneously together? We can focus either on the
rapidly switch,
we can rapidly fix it, but at any time, any one point at time, you can either focus on the foreground or the background. Okay. So, in this image, now first we focus on the ground, that is the where the dogs emerge. Okay. If you focus on this white, then you can see a small spaceship is emerging. Again, if whenever we look at the background or foreground, the noise is an important factor. What is the noise? This page, for example, has lot of text and not much of visual variation. As a result, readers won't be able to draw any particular place on the page. The whole thing is repeated. Okay. So, there is not much variation. So, the reader is not going to get anything out of it, nothing particular. If you want the reader to focus on something, then there has to be a contrast, right. It gives you a very powerful tool to respond to any given rhetorical situations, but we need to be careful with the visual noise. Noise is anything that interferes with the writer's message, static on a phone line or busy backgrounds or loopy fonts. These are the noises. The second principle is called the grouping. One of the most important two principles of Gestalt is, first is the FigureGround, the second one is the grouping. We tend to group objects that are similar. Similar objects are grouped together. For example, here in the picture, if you look at all these rectangles are all grouped together, and then we form this plus sign. All these the circle things are grouped together as form a square. Right. We tend to group things and objects that are similar. Okay. Grouping or similarity, some literature calls this as a similarity. Similar elements, shape or color are grouped together, combined with separable dimensions to assist with visual text segmentations. Related visual elements should look similar. Again, this is another example where black dots are together grouped organizations. This is again another example where we group all the black dots and all the gray dots together. We do not group this way, we do not do that, right. It is very straight. Similarly, we group this way row wise, we do not do the grouping in the column wise, that is because the objects are similarity, right. Again, law of similarity, we group things together, where here we group things together, here we group things together, right. Here we group things together, and it can be color also. So, this is an example where we can group things based on the scale. Here we can group things depending upon the shape. This is based on the color, we group things based on the color. The third law is called the proximity. When we look at things, the closer objects are now perceived together. For example, instead of looking at the black dots and then yellow circle, they are all small yellow circles. Okay. All the black dots are grouped together, they are all put them together, okay. And it emerges a full dog, right. Can you see the dog over here? It emerges a full dog, they are all grouped together. When we look at this image, instead of seeing black spots, we group the black dots together and we see the deer. Again, based on the color or the shape or the separation, right, proximity examples. The fourth law is the continuity law. People are more likely to construct visual grouping out of elements that are as smooth as possible and it is continuous, rather than that one contains the abrupt changes in the direction. Okay. Implies connectedness, which is stronger than the proximity. Use connections to show the relations. For example, here we tend to group these objects together because there is a smooth flow. If you look at this one, there is a abrupt flow, therefore we do not connect it. And also now there are colors also same, there is one more reason, and any given picture there may be one or more than one law of Gestalt can be applied to in order to perceive things, right. Continuity examples again, and even though there seems to be a break over here, but we perceive this as continuity, right. These are one good examples of continuity. Connectedness, can we connect this together, or how do we connect it this way? It is very difficult. If the lines were not there, we would connect them like this. Okay. In order to make the perceiver connect these two dots, we need to explicitly connect by a line. Okay. Similarly, if the lines were not there, we would group this together. In order to make it explicit, we need to do this. Similarly here, the shape, we will connect it by default, otherwise if you want, you have to connect it this way. Similarly this also, right. And then fifth principle is the symmetry. Symmetrical elements emphasize a relationship. Possible use of the symmetry is an interface to emphasize the symmetry. We are going to see some examples. Okay. So, there is no symmetry over here. Here we see the symmetry, here also we see the symmetry. Okay. The sixth law is called the law of closure. Humans tends to look for closed contours. We perceive things in order to find out some closed contours. Okay. For example, even though we see a segment of lines, we close them as a circle. We perceive this as a closed form, right. Similarly, this also is a closure example, or also it is called the contours. You can see that even though this is like a Pac-Man kind of shape is there, we perceive an object here which is not there. we perceive the closure of the shape, right. This is called the Kanishka triangle as shown in the figure ground illusory contrast, and this is one of the classical examples of optical illusion. Okay. We tend to now there is a negative space created in the FedEx logo, specifically whenever the logo designers they use Gestalt principles very much. Okay. Have you seen this FedEx image logo before? And then can you find out yeah, missing arrow over here?
Yes.
Yes. So, here is a missing arrow. We try to close things together. This is a classical example, right. Even though this is considered separately, we tend to close this negative space and then perceive a missing arrow. Again, this circle we perceive this is closed, this rectangle we perceive as closed. These are all classical examples. You can see again a 3D sphere which is missing as a closure example. And then seventh principle is called the law of pregnance. Pregnance it appears to be a German term, but I am not sure what is the real meaning of it. It sounds like a fragrance or no pregnancy, right. But the real meaning is we try to simplify things. When we have a complex object, we try to simplify it, we perceive simple objects. For example, if you look at this Olympics circles, there are now segments of the circles, right, and there are now smaller this objects. We do not divide the Olympic circle into smaller different objects, we perceive them as 5 different circles. So, that is the simplest form. Instead of perceiving each object there are 1, 2, 3, 4 such smaller objects, we do not perceive them. Okay. So, this is one good examples of the pregnance. We want to complex figures, we want to reduce into simpler figure. The law of pregnance or goodness of the figure creates a simplest meaning out of the complex object. So, figure ground relationship define important parts of the scene. Okay. This is called the sharpening, of the image. So, this figure if it is in the middle, then we would be focusing it properly, but because it is at the side, it creates a little bit of tension. Okay. So, always the center of the image is attracting the focus. If it is out of center, then it is causing little tension over here. Okay. The off center position is causing a little tension.
So, is it another principle or just an observation?
This is another principle we can say, yes. This is one of the modern principles of the Gestalts.
So, classical only 7 principles.
Classicals are 6 or 7, yes. And then relative size also is one of the principles. Again, it can be a derivative or modern principle. Smaller components of the pattern tend to be perceived as objects. For example, here the black one or together is conceived as objects. Okay. We have seen some principles, but perception is not all the perceptions are explained by the Gestalt's principles. Okay, there are some problems with it. Okay. So, essentially some of the terms are very vague. When we say now a simplest organization, what is simplest? It is not very well defined. Okay. These are the problems with the Gestalt principles. Now, what we have seen is only for the visual perception. Can you imagine how these principles can be extended to haptic perception? Right. So, think about all the 6 classical principles of Gestalts can be extended to haptics or even the sound. Right. We will stop here, we will do a very small worksheet example.